You don't have a focus problem. That belief is comforting, and it's the reason distraction keeps winning. If focus techniques worked, you wouldn't be here. You wouldn't need timers, apps, playlists, or tricks. You wouldn't feel sharp for 10 minutes and scattered for the next hour. Distraction isn't caused by weakness. It's caused by division. Your mind isn't failing to focus. It's trying to hold too many directions at once. That tension is what exhausts you. This is stillness and direction. If you're here for productivity hacks, this will frustrate you. But if you want to understand why distraction keeps returning no matter how disciplined you think you are, stay. And if this way of thinking resonates, like the video and subscribe. Not for motivation, but so you stay connected when attention starts slipping again. Here's the truth most people never hear. Distraction is not the opposite of focus. It is the result of unfinished intention. You sit down to work, but part of your mind is still elsewhere. A message you didn't answer, a thought you postponed, a decision you avoided. You think you're distracted because you lack discipline. You're distracted because your attention is split. The modern world trains this split constantly. Multiple tabs, multiple goals, multiple identities competing for attention. And then you blame yourself for not concentrating. Japanese monks never made this mistake. They didn't try to focus harder. They didn't fight distraction. They removed the conditions that allowed distraction to exist. This is where modern advice fails you. Resist distractions, build willpower, force concentration. Resistance strengthens what it resists. Every time you fight distraction, you acknowledge its authority. The monks did something colder. They removed choice. They understood that attention collapses the moment the mind believes it has alternatives. As long as your mind knows it can switch, check, escape, or delay, distraction remains alive. This is why even disciplined people fail. They sit down with good intentions but leave mental exits open, and attention leaks through those exits. You don't need better focus. You need singularity. One direction, one act, one mind. The monks had a word for this state, a principle so strict most modern people reject it instantly, not because it doesn't work, but because it feels extreme. In the next chapter, I'll show you why fighting distraction always fails, and why the more you struggle with focus, the more divided your mind becomes. This is the trap everyone falls into, and until you see it clearly, distraction will keep returning, no matter how disciplined you think you are. The more you fight distraction, the stronger it becomes. This sounds wrong to modern thinking, but it explains why nothing you try lasts. Every technique you've used assumes one thing, that distraction is an enemy you must overpower. The monks never believed that. They saw distraction as a signal, not a threat. Here is the mistake most men make. They sit down to focus while secretly planning to escape. They tell themselves, "I'll just check this quickly. I'll respond later. I'll stop if it gets boring." Those thoughts don't feel dangerous. They are, because distraction does not begin with action. It begins with permission. The moment your mind knows it has an exit, attention weakens. You haven't clicked anything yet, you haven't moved, but focus is already bleeding. This is why fighting distraction fails. You are trying to concentrate while leaving alternatives alive. Resistance creates tension. Tension divides attention, and division is the source of distraction. The monks understood this deeply. They observed that every time a man resisted distraction, his mind became louder, more restless, more impatient, more divided. Why? Because resistance keeps the object of distraction in awareness. Don't think about it, ignore it, stay focused. Each command repeats the temptation. This is why productivity systems exhaust you. You are constantly monitoring yourself. Am I focused enough? Am I drifting? Should I correct this? That internal supervision fragments attention even more. The monks refused to supervise their minds. They did not fight thoughts. They did not suppress impulses. They removed the context that made switching possible. This is the key difference. Modern men fight distraction inside the mind. Monks eliminated it outside the mind. They understood something uncomfortable. As long as you believe you can switch tasks, your mind will keep testing that option. Fighting distraction is still engagement, and engagement feeds it. This is why you feel tired after trying to focus. You're not tired from work. You're tired from internal conflict. One part of you wants to act. Another part wants relief. That conflict never resolves through effort. It resolves through elimination. The monks eliminated alternatives. When it was time to sit, there was only sitting. When it was time to walk, there was only walking. When it was time to work, there was only work. No overlap, no multitasking, no mental side doors. This feels extreme to modern people because modern identity depends on flexibility. But flexibility is exactly what keeps distraction alive. If you can switch, your mind will. The monks closed the switch, not through force, through rule. And once the rule was absolute, distraction lost relevance, not because they fought it, but because it had nowhere to enter. In the next chapter, I'll reveal the exact principle they used, a rule so strict it feels almost unreasonable. Ichigyo Zame, one act, one mind. Most people hear it and immediately reject it. That rejection is why distraction keeps returning. Japanese monks had a rule so strict most people dismiss it instantly. They called it Ichigyo Zanmai. It means one act, one mind. Not multitasking, not balancing priorities, not managing attention. Total absorption in a single act, to the exclusion of everything else. This is where modern people misunderstand focus completely. They believe focus is something you add. Better music, better environment, better tools. The monks believed focus is something you remove toward. Remove alternatives, remove overlap, remove divided intention. Ichigyo Zanmai was not a technique, it was a law. When you eat, you only eat. When you walk, you only walk. When you clean, you only clean. No thinking ahead, no replaying the past, no mental side tasks. This sounds simple. It is not, because your mind is addicted to division. You are used to doing one thing while thinking about 5 others, and that habit feels normal. The monks saw it as the root of distraction. They understood something brutal. A divided mind cannot be focused, no matter how disciplined the person is. Ichigyo Zanmai forbids divided attention completely, not partially, not most of the time, completely. This is where people fail. They try to practice it gently. I'll focus, but I'll keep my phone nearby. I'll work, but I'll check messages later. I'll be present, but I'll think ahead. That is not Ichigyo Zanmai. That is negotiation. And negotiation reopens distraction. The monks did not negotiate. When it was time for an act, everything else was suspended. Not resisted, suspended. This is the difference most people miss. Ichigyo Zanmai does not fight thoughts. It makes them irrelevant. When the mind knows there is only one permitted action, it eventually stops offering alternatives. But before that happens, something uncomfortable appears. Restlessness. The urge to switch, the itch to escape, the feeling that this is too much. This is the moment most people quit. They assume the method isn't working. It is working perfectly. Because the restlessness was always there, Ichigyo Zanmai simply removes the distractions that were hiding it. The monks trained this discomfort deliberately. They did not seek stimulation. They did not seek variety. They allowed monotony to sharpen attention. This is why their minds became still, not because they forced calm, but because there was nothing left to divide attention. Ichigyo Zanmai is ruthless. It demands that you stop living half present. No music while working, no thinking while eating, no planning while walking, just the act. This feels extreme in a modern world. That's why it works. Because distraction survives on permission. Ichi-Gyo-Zanmai removes permission entirely, and once permission is gone, attention begins to stabilize on its own. In the next chapter, I'll show you why monks intentionally trained boredom, and why boredom, not temptation, is the final test of attention. This is where most disciplined people still fail. This is where focus is actually forged. Not in silence, not in peace, but in boredom. Most people believe boredom is the enemy of attention. The monks believed the opposite. They saw boredom as the final gatekeeper. If your attention collapses when nothing is stimulating you, then your attention was never stable. It was entertained. Modern men are addicted to stimulation. Music while working, noise while thinking, content while resting. And then they wonder why their mind wanders the moment stimulation disappears. Japanese monks trained boredom deliberately. They sat longer than was comfortable. They repeated the same tasks without variation. They removed novelty on purpose, not to punish themselves, but to expose weakness. Boredom reveals the truth about your attention. When nothing changes, the mind panics. It looks for escape, for stimulation, for relief. That urge is not random. It is the habit of divided living fighting to survive. Ichi-Gyo-Zanmai collapses here for most people, not because it's too difficult, but because boredom removes the lost distraction. This is where the monks stayed. They did not escape boredom, they entered it. And something unexpected happened. When boredom was no longer resisted, it stopped demanding attention. The mind ran out of places to go. This is the moment attention stabilizes, not because you forced it, but because distraction starved. Modern focus advice never reaches this stage. It constantly feeds the mind stimulation to keep it engaged. That guarantees fragility. The monks wanted durability. They believed attention should survive even when nothing is interesting. That's why their days looked repetitive. Same bells, same paths, same tasks. Repetition without novelty. At first, the mind rebels. Then it quiets. Not into calm, into presence. This is why monks could hold attention effortlessly. Not because they tried harder, but because boredom had already burned away the need to escape. This chapter is where most people fail. They think boredom means something is wrong. The monks saw boredom as proof that attention training had begun. If boredom feels unbearable to you, it means distraction still has leverage. And leverage only exists where choice exists. The monks removed choice. They did not ask, "Am I engaged?" They asked, "Is this the act in front of me?" Nothing else mattered. In the next chapter, I'll show you what happens when attention is trained long enough that it stops being effort, when focus becomes identity. This is the stage where distraction no longer returns because it no longer fits who you are. This is where distraction finally loses its grip. Not because you defeated it, but because it no longer belongs. Most people try to do focus. They schedule it, they force it, they manage it. And that's why it never lasts. The monks understood something most men never reach. As long as focus is something you practice, distraction will always return. Because practice implies effort. Effort implies resistance. Resistance implies collapse. So the monks went further. They turned attention into identity. They did not think, "I need to focus now." They thought, "This is how one lives." This is the shift everything depends on. When attention becomes identity, you stop switching by instinct. Not because you're disciplined, but because switching feels incorrect, like stepping out of alignment, like breaking form. This is why monks didn't rely on reminders or techniques. Their entire day was structured to support singularity. One task at a time, one place at a time, one intention at a time. There was no mental clutter to manage because clutter had no permission to exist. Modern men collapse here because they keep flexibility alive. They want to focus but also keep options open. They want presence but also escape routes. That contradiction keeps distraction alive. The monks removed contradiction. They accepted a simple rule. Where you are is what you do. No overlay, no anticipation, no mental multitasking. This is why their attention felt effortless. Effort disappears when the mind stops arguing. Most people never reach this stage because they keep trying to control attention. Control still implies struggle. Identity does not. Once attention becomes who you are, distraction stops being tempting, not because you resist it, but because it feels out of place. This is why monks could sit for hours without checking the time, why they could perform repetitive tasks without mental fatigue. They weren't focused, they were undivided. This chapter should confront you, because it reveals the final illusion, that focus is something you turn on. It isn't. It's something you become. And once you become it, distraction doesn't need to be destroyed. It dissolves. In the final chapter, I'll show you the state monks reached where distraction cannot even enter, not because they guard against it, but because there is no doorway left open. This is where attention becomes permanent. This is where Japanese monks stopped talking about focus altogether. Because focus implies effort. Effort implies resistance. Resistance implies the possibility of failure. The monks were not interested in managing distraction. They were interested in creating a state where distraction had no entry point. By this stage, Ichigyo-Zamai had done its work. There was no divided attention left to exploit, no alternatives competing for space, no mental doors left open. Distraction didn't need to be blocked. It simply didn't belong. This is what most people never understand. Distraction is not a force that attacks you. It is an opportunity you leave open. When that opportunity disappears, distraction has nowhere to land. The monks reached a state where attention was no longer something they applied. It was the environment they lived inside. Just as water does not try to be wet, attention no longer tried to be focused. It simply was. This is why their minds felt immovable, not because they were strong, but because nothing inside them was fragmented. Fragmentation is what distraction feeds on. Once fragmentation ends, distraction starves. Modern people never reach this stage because they keep one habit alive. They allow the possibility of switching. Switching tasks, switching attention, switching identity. The monks eliminated switching entirely, not violently, not forcefully, structurally. Where you were was what you did. Nothing else existed in that moment. This is why their days felt slow to outsiders, but effortless to them. Effort only exists where there is inner conflict. When conflict ends, effort disappears. This is the final truth behind Ichigyo-Zamai. You don't destroy distractions, you outgrow them by becoming singular, by removing alternatives, by refusing to live divided. Once attention becomes whole, distraction no longer feels tempting, it feels irrelevant. This is why no app, no technique, no productivity system can replicate this, because they all try to manage a divided mind. The monks eliminated division itself. This is the state they reached. Not excitement, not calm, not control, undivided presence. And in that state, distraction cannot enter because there is nothing left for it to pull apart. This is not a method you try occasionally. It is a way you live. And once lived long enough, it becomes permanent. That is the real power of Ichigyo Zamai. Not focus, but a mind so unified that distraction no longer makes sense.